Welcome everybody. We're live on the Smart Connector group. This is also the Smart Connector podcast. I have the most awesome guest for you tonight. And now that we're in lockdown and it's been going on for a long time, I think we're all feeling a little bit jaded. So the timing couldn't be better to introduce you to someone who is going to help you step into your superpowers, become superhuman. We have a really exciting guy, Harry Kalymnios. Welcome, Harry.
Hi, thanks, Jane. Great to be here.
Yeah.
You're well, and everybody watching, listening live as well, or on the recording.
So Harry, tell us all about yourself. You're all about superpowers and being superhuman and being the very best version of yourself, right?
Yeah, I mean, let me explain. I guess the first thing to explain is, well, what do I mean by superhuman? Because my mum especially, actually, she really doesn't like that term. She goes, "Oh, I think that's very misleading. What you're talking about superhuman." Now, what I mean by superhuman is to imagine yourself on your best day, when everything seems to be flowing right, everything's working, your productivity is up, your relationships are up, your energy is up. And then imagine timesing that by 10. And then rather than living like that haphazardly, like once in a while where you feel like that, being able to live like that 8, 9 days out of 10, maybe even 10, who knows? But there's always room for things to throw a spanner in the works. But really, it's about living a superior version of yourself. So we're not talking about being able to do handstands down the street or cartwheels down the street or holding your breath for half an hour in terms of superhuman feats like that. What we are talking about really is being an everyday superhuman. So what does an everyday superhuman mean? It means being able to do that full day at work that we have to do. But if you want to get stuff done beforehand, you can do it. If you want to do your side hustle in the background or in the evenings, you can do that. If you want to learn public speaking in the evenings or go to a club or like a speaking club or whatever it is, to be able to do all of that and still feel great and energized and healthy. That's what really I mean by superhuman, is operating at a superior level to what you're normally operating at. So that's the frame, I guess, of reference for us tonight. And that's what I mean by being superhuman. So we're not talking superhuman powers, except for we are unlocking our own innate superpowers, because I guess, and this goes back to my story really, is that I felt like maybe a decade or so ago, that what I was observing in myself and also people around me was not really us living to our fullest potential, our fullest capabilities. And almost, I guess now maybe it's more obvious than ever, like that kind of Groundhog Day, that hamster wheel of life where we just doing on Monday to Friday. At least in my case anyway, I was in a job that I didn't hate by any stretch of the imagination. I was always very grateful for having a job and an income, but I didn't love it and it wasn't my passion. But I guess I fell into it, and I wasn't really thinking. I guess my life plan didn't really extend when I was a child past university. So after university, I went traveling for about 2 or 3 years. Well, 2 years, came back for a couple of months, and then I went and lived in Greece for 6 months. And I wasn't really sure what I was going to do with my life. And I ended up actually, when I came back from that 3 years abroad, having gained a good degree in physics with astrophysics, a first-class degree in physics and astrophysics. I found myself working in my local pub that I used to drink in when I was 17, 18, well, let's say 18, just to be on the safe side. So I was 18 years old, and I started working there, and then I managed to get a job temping at a law firm that my older sister was working at, and I just thought, I just got into this London working thing. I mean, and eventually, after working there for a bit, being made redundant, I ended up at the London Stock Exchange. So worked at the London Stock Exchange. Now, sounds great, sounds fancy, but it's not Wall Street. I'm not a trader. There was no trading going on. I was actually working in IT. So I was working in like IT operations, and I was working night shifts and different shifts for about 3 years, and then I transitioned. So I was there for 6 years in total at the stock exchange. 3 of those was working for a company called Accenture, and then the other 3 was directly for the stock exchange. But the whole time I was literally in the same building. And so I was just going through that hamster wheel of life. And I thought to myself, there's got to be, this is fine, but it's not really lighting my fire. I would, do my normal thing during the week. I was always quite active, quite fit. I'd go to the gym. But then, Friday would come, you'd go out for those drinks. And then I always had these plans. The weekend is going to be the time when, I'm going to get started on that book. I'm going to get started on that side business. Or I'm going to do whatever it is. And then you drink too much on a Friday night, half of Saturday's hungover. Then, before you know it's Sunday evening and you're going, I've got to go to work. And you've got that Monday morning drag. On and on it went. And then eventually after the financial crisis it was 2008, the financial crisis, but the residual effects, I guess they're still being felt now, but really for those next couple of years were being felt by companies, and it gave them an opportunity a lot of the time to make layoffs and just claim the financial crisis as the reason for the layoffs. And so they made everybody in my department redundant, except for me actually, not because I was particularly someone that had to be held onto. It's just, I think, because if they had made me redundant as well, they would have had to announce it to the press. Not because I'm special or anything, but because I think there's a threshold of like 18 people where you have to then announce it. And I would have been like the 18th person or the 19th person. So I was held on for another couple of months, and then I eventually had to ask for redundancy. And the reason I asked for redundancy is because I guess I was waiting for that sign from the universe, right? Of what am I supposed to do with my life? What am I supposed to be? And the truth is, it never comes, right? You might get hints, especially if you're in tune with your intuition, you might figure things out. But I guess from my perspective, I was thinking, if ever there was a sign that I was supposed to get, maybe it was this redundancy thing. And so I took the redundancy. I started to then pursue some other interests while I had a bit of time off. Namely, a number of years before, I'd come across a term called NLP, Neuro-Linguistic Programming, which is, for those of you maybe watching that aren't familiar with it or have heard something about it but not quite sure, I like to think of it as just a collection of tools, or communication tools, which really are labeling things that we already do, but packaging them up so that we understand and can replicate them. So there's nothing, in my view anyway, some people can get a bit of a bad rap and think, oh, well, NLP is this mind trickery stuff that people use. And Darren Brown is, probably one of the most famous people that has done some NLP, but I equate it, I guess, to like a knife. Right? A knife is neither good nor bad. You can use it for good things or you can use it for bad things. And it's the same with any skill that you learn, I think. Anyway, I did an NLP course, and then that led me down a whole rabbit hole, which we can go into as well, which ultimately led me here. There's more to the story, but I realize I've been speaking just non-stop for ages. So yes, it led me down a rabbit hole of personal development, going to different courses. And then I guess, making an even longer story a bit shorter, I started doing a lot of the things that I was noticing other successful people doing. So I started noticing, 5 or 7 or 8 or 10 people out of 10 were telling me to, not me, but were saying, this is beneficial. So I thought, oh, maybe I'll try doing this thing. And then another 7 out of 10 were saying, this is beneficial. And I thought, I'll try doing that. And over the course of about a month or so, I think I made about 30 small changes. And over the course of about a year, I made maybe about 200. Ooh. And what I noticed was, energy levels go up, vitality go up, resilience increase, health increase, relationships, focus, productivity, everything went in the right direction. And at the same time, after a few months of not working, I started to contract at the headquarters of Sainsbury's. And what I needed at the time was, well, what I recognized, I suppose, at the time was when you're a contractor or a freelancer, unlike when you're employed, you don't get sick pay. I guess you wouldn't get furlough if you were in this situation right now. You would just be let go. And so as a contractor, as a freelancer, you have to, because you're a freelancer, you're being paid a little bit more on a daily or weekly rate for your skills. So you have to be effectively better than what the permanent employees are, or at least appear to be. You have to contribute more, and you have to be there to get paid. You can't take a sick day if you feel sick, or rather you just don't want to get sick. And so whilst I was always into fitness and exercise and activity, ever since I can remember, since 5 years old, I've always been into that sort of side. I wasn't necessarily into health, and I realized maybe a decade or so ago that they're not the same thing. Fitness and health are two separate things. They may be opposite sides of the same coin, but they are slightly different. And I really started to focus on aspects of health and vitality and energy. And I noticed that I wasn't taking sick days, whereas I used to get 4 or 5 colds a year. I maybe get one every 3 or 4 years now, and that's a lot easier and short-lived than it ever has been. And it's only happens when I don't do the things that I eventually discovered and talk about. So
okay.
Yeah, so essentially that's a little bit of the backstory. So then we can go deeper into that through the conversation.
All right. Well, before we go on, just want to say hi to Sanjeet Bhavanani, who actually introduced us. So hi, Sanjeet. It's great to have you here. Hi, Richard. Richard is here every week. So if you have any questions, doing Unleash the Power with Tony Robbins, Richard says. So we love Tony Robbins, don't we, Harry? He's a bit of an inspiration, isn't he? What do you think?
I first listened to his audios maybe 15, 16 years ago now, and listened to them today, and went to UPW maybe 8 years ago.
Yeah. And we both went to the Yes Group in London, didn't we? So I don't think that I met you there, but I know that we also connected through that, which is the Tony Robbins.
Yeah. It was actually going to the Yes Group that really started me down this whole journey, because I met someone on my NLP course who told me about the Yes Group. I went to the Yes Group. Through the Yes Group, I actually went to the first main event I went to, which started the whole ball rolling, was an event by Joseph McLennan III. So Tony Robbins is like top trainer. And I went to an event called the A Factor, which is what it was. Was it called the A Factor at the time? I think it was called the A Factor at the time. And this was, I guess, 2011. And that is when things kind of snowballed. So, yeah.
Okay. Well, that's a great introduction. Thank you so much for that, Harry. So let's get into it. So you mentioned that you made all these changes over the course of 1 year. Now, what I'm fascinated to hear, Harry, is a lot of people, I mean, I coach people as well, and a lot of people say to me that they haven't got the discipline. I struggle with it myself. I know that it would probably be a very good idea for me to give up chocolate, for example. But I don't, because I like chocolate. And so most of the time we cling on to these habits that are not necessarily very good for us, but they make us feel good in the short term. And I guess what would worry me about making all of those changes is I would think, do you know what? I'd have to give up all these things, these little comforts that make me feel good. So I'd love to know how you managed to get around that and actually find the self-discipline to implement these super duper habits that gave you a longer term payoff in terms of your health and energy and well-being.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really interesting question. It's one that I get asked a lot of the time. It's I don't have the discipline, don't have the willpower, etc. And I say it's not to do with that. It really isn't, because those things are fleeting and they wane and they ebb and flow, and therefore you will always struggle to resist. Like what they say, what resists persists. And for me, there's a couple of ways of doing things. As from what I see as best practice. There's one, which is the one I advocate a lot of the time, is tiny steps and small changes, and never absolutism. So where you say, I'm never going to have something. And I'll give you an example in a moment. Way is where there is a significant, I guess, emotional change in a person. And I think at that time, for me, most of these habits came about through the second thing I've just described, the significant emotional change that I had. And I guess that came about because I saw lots of people who I guess I admired in one way or another, and shifted my paradigm, my way of thinking about certain aspects of life, and thinking, oh, this is how it could be. The way we've been taught about aging, illness, disease is not actually how it is, which initially maybe angered me, and sometimes still does to this day, to like anger me, like especially what we see right now about things. But then it liberated me, because what it did is it gave me the power within me to make changes that I was then not like at the mercy of, say, circumstances. Right now, things are going to happen, of course, they always do, but we have so much more control over things. In fact, I was trying to explain this concept to my 7-year-old niece yesterday. We were having breakfast out in the sun. She was having a bit of porridge, I was having my green smoothie, and we were talking. I'd read her a story the night before about Aretha Franklin. So she's got all these cool books about women who have done amazing things. And so we read Aretha Franklin. And so the next day we were listening to Aretha Franklin. It's because she wanted to, like, we were listening to Respect and all the other good tunes. And then she and I couldn't remember whether she was still alive or not. And so we were kind of Googling her, and then we found out she died from pancreatic cancer, and we started talking about longevity and death and everything, and she said, oh, but we can't help how long we live. And I said, well, actually, you know, there are many things we can do which can help us lengthen our life, and, you know, such as what we're doing right now, which is, you know, being on the grass, and being in the sunshine, and having green smoothies and healthy food, and drinking water, and getting good sleep and all that. So we can do a lot of those things. And so that really, I guess, created a change in paradigm for me. So for me, those changes were not about willpower, discipline. What they were fundamentally were, so I'm not sure if your listeners or yourself are familiar with, I guess is it Robert Dilt's epistemology model, where in NLP, where you have it's basically neurological levels of change. That's what it's called, neurological levels of change. And this is basically a model, if you like, which says that you can affect change at different levels. The lowest level is your environment. So you can change your environment and that can change your behavior or a habit. You know, you can change your environment for who you hang around with, like, or, you know, because if you always go to the pub, then you're probably more likely to drink. If you always go to the gym or the park, you're more likely to maybe exercise. And so let's say, for example, someone wants to change how they feel, to feel relaxed. They get stressed a lot. Okay. The next level up from environment is skills and capabilities. So you could give them a new skill, for example, such as breathing or meditation, which will help them manage their stress, as opposed to maybe right now what they do is turn to a cigarette to manage their stress. Now, you can give them that skill, but that may not still be enough. They may still go to the cigarette. Now, why do they go to the cigarette? Maybe the level above, which is about values and beliefs, they believe ultimately that maybe smoking a cigarette is cool, right? They see pictures of James Dean smoking. All the cool kids used to smoke, you know, by the chip shop when they're at school. You know, that they may believe that. And therefore, even if you give them the skill of deep breathing, for example, which incidentally, taking a cigarette smoke is really that, but you know, you're going out and you're exhaling all that stress. But let's, you know, maybe take the cigarette break without the cigarette, I suggest. But if that's their belief, it's not going to change. Now, the level above that would be something like identity. So who you believe you are. So my dad, for example, he started smoking at 18. He smoked for 40 years. So until he was 58, 77 now. Gave up like 19, 20 years ago. But he gave up the last cigarette he had was on the morning of the day of his triple heart bypass.
Oh.
And he stopped smoking that day. I wasn't actually here. I was on my long travels. I was talking about, I was actually in Australia. And he never had a cigarette again. And he never had an urge to have another cigarette again. And he had no trouble. Like, so you could plump him in a smoky pub and he's not going to be tempted to have a cigarette. Because what fundamentally shifted is he went from being a smoker to not even like an identity of someone who used to smoke but hasn't smoked, to an identity of non-smoker. Okay, now he may have substituted it with other vices in the interim years, but the point is that he'd changed his identity. And that was really what happened to me, is that I changed my identity about certain things, and therefore it wasn't about resisting or lack of anything. It wasn't about willpower, discipline, and it wasn't about thinking about giving up things, because everything has an opportunity cost. And so when you say yes to something, you say no to 1,000 other things, and vice versa often. So by me saying no to, I don't know, a Big Mac and fries, I'm not giving up the Big Mac and fries or the joy. I'm gaining, I don't know, whatever it is, the health, the energy, the vitality or something. So that's one thing I would suggest, is that reframe for me. And that change of identity. So, and the other thing really is, that go slow, and not to ever have that absolute, I never have things. So I, 10 years ago now, exactly 10 years ago, in fact, 2011, and I think it was Pancake Tuesday last week, wasn't it?
Yeah.
So most years, although I haven't this year, my niece was asking me what I've given up this year for Lent. She's given up chocolates. Last year she was 6 years old. Last year she became vegan for Lent. Very, very progressive. I didn't know what that word was until maybe 10 years ago. And then 10 years ago, I decided to give up meat for Lent. And I only gave it up for Lent, and then I was fully prepared to go back to eating it on Easter Sunday. And in fact, I did go back to eating it on Easter Sunday. But then I felt really kind of heavy and tired and went to sleep for a couple of hours in the middle of the day. And then something happened, and just like a penny dropped. And I'd given up meat before for Lent, like years before, always went back to eating it. And something just dropped, and I just thought, you know what? I felt more energized, lighter, slept better, could eat kind of till I was full, but then not feel stuffed in a way afterwards. So I just decided to not have it. And now I've not given up meat. I didn't have it yesterday. I didn't have it the day before yesterday. I didn't have it all the days in the last 10 years. It's not to say I won't eat meat tomorrow or the next day. So I haven't said I'm never going to have it again.
Yeah.
I just haven't had it for the last 10 years.
Yeah.
That's all. So that's
I get that, because sometimes if you say that you're not going to have something, then it's like saying don't think about a white elephant, or it's that thing of it can't just fade from your life. It's always there and something that you're kicking against, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I've as you I think know, I'm having a reasonably entertaining week, because I'm homeschooling and looking after my sister's kid, and she was asking me, because obviously my I've got 4 nieces, and the 3 that are old enough, they all know about my healthy habits and all that, and they always say, "Oh, you always smell like smoothie," even if I haven't had a smoothie for a day or two. They go, "Oh, you smell like smoothie." So they always know about this, and they always like. And my niece yesterday was like, she was talking about chocolate or something. She goes, "Oh, but you don't eat chocolate if it's vegan chocolate." I go, "Well, yeah, I still have chocolate, but I make sure it's not in the house, and I don't have things like present for her in the house. So because the temptation will be there. So." Like the iPad that we're using for homeschooling is out of sight unless we're using it for the homeschooling. The TV is never on, because she's not massively used to that at her house either. Her parents don't do that much for her, but she's like any other kid. If you put her in front of a TV, she becomes a zombie. for a bit. So we put the pen and paper there, and I say to her, I don't stop having crisps. I mean, I had a packet of crisps today, but what I don't do is have them in the house, which means I have them when I'm out. So I don't stop myself from having any of those things, but I know what I'm like. And I say to my mum, because my mum now lives closer to me, and so she's always bringing around things. And so she brought round a bunch of stuff the other week for my niece to have, and it was stuff that I like as well. And I was like, don't leave it with me, because I know my mind, and I know I'm a bit all or nothing, especially I've always known this. I could usually eat like 10 bags of Wotsits when I was a kid in like one sitting, and so I just don't have it there. Why rely on willpower to make those changes? Why not just create the environment that supports those changes? Don't resist ever having that, but have it with awareness. And I think that's the key, is bringing awareness. So if I decide to do something, have chocolate or have something with dairy in it or whatever, I know what that will do to me. Yeah. And I do it with full awareness. So if I want to perform well, I'm probably not going to do something that I know makes me feel bad. But if I'm sitting at home, I'm alone, I'm just going to watch a movie and I'm not got a busy day the next day and I'm just going to mong out, maybe I'll have something that I wouldn't normally have if I was out for dinner with people.
Yeah, I get that. And isn't it also partly just about knowing yourself? Because I'm one of these people, for example, that I could eat like a couple of crisps a week, if there was like an open bag or something, because I'm not particularly motivated by crisps.
Right, yeah.
Even with chocolate, I might have a square after a meal or something like that.
Right, good. I'm not like that.
It's just that my makeup, I'm just not one of those people that kind of binges on food. I just don't do it. But everybody's different, aren't they? And for some people, the pull of those unhealthy foods, as you said, it's got to be all or nothing. And some people just like that, aren't they?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm probably one of those. I mean, not for everything. And even now when I have my quote unquote unhealthy stuff, it will generally be the better version of that unhealthy stuff if I can, and not too complicated. But I know that, if I've got 6 bags of crisps there in the house, they're not going to last the week or probably even 2 days.
Right.
But if I don't have them in the house, I might go weeks between buying a packet. So.
Okay, so we've got some comments, and Richard said, yeah, okay, so Richard's got, he says he could never be a full vegan.
Well, I'm not a vegan either. I'm a megan.
Yeah, okay.
My version of vegan, which, like I said, I think I was an accidental vegan for about 2 years.
Yeah.
I think I stopped having dairy like maybe 13 years ago for other reasons, just because someone told me it might help with my sinuses.
Yeah.
I had problems with all my life, and it turns out it did help.
Yeah.
And then meat went, and then a couple of years after that, quite by accident, I stopped eating fish. And I didn't realize I'd stopped eating fish for about 6 months. And then eggs, I'm not sure. I think I may have stopped eating eggs for about 2 or 3 years, but probably in the last 5 years, I've definitely, I had a bit of egg today, actually. So, I'm not too, am I prescriptive? I guess I've got certain disciplines and certain foundational principles, which have flexibility with. But yeah, I prefer to say megan rather than vegan.
Okay. All right. So one of the conversations that comes up with me and the people that I work with a lot is the mindset of success, because obviously we're on an entrepreneurial group tonight. My podcast is for entrepreneurs. Those are the people that I serve, and a lot of the time this whole issue of what is the mindset of success does come up. And I was actually having this conversation with one of my personal mentees today, and I was saying to him, this self-talk, what you tell yourself, is so powerful, isn't it? Because I've noticed that I talk to a lot of successful entrepreneurs. Obviously, I interview them for the podcast, and I'm just, around a lot of people like that. And I've really noticed the language patterns that tend to be quite self-congratulatory a lot of the time. It's like, I had a conversation with somebody last night, and he said, my brother and I, we've just done something really clever. We invested, we made this fantastic investment, and it was so smart that we did this. And some people would think, oh, he's just bragging. But it's almost like I noticed that they have a certain way of talking that is empowering, and really bringing about more success, because it's almost like you can hear it in the way that they talk about themselves and their accomplishments. So I'm really interested to explore that, because you've studied NLP, and that's some of that is about language patterns, isn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, the first book I wrote, actually, which is this one I got up on the wall, one whole chapter is about language.
Okay.
So this book was, I guess, written because it was, the idea I was talking about before about changing your identity, changing who you are, because this book is written for all those people that were, starting a new gym pattern, exercise pattern, diet pattern, and then you go back to the same thing over and over again. The reason is because you don't change that.
Harry, before we go on, can you just say the name of the book, because some people will be listening on audio?
The Thought Gym.
The Thought Gym. Okay. And who's it by?
Sorry?
Who's it? Oh, it's written by you.
Oh, no. Yeah. This book. Right.
The Thought Gym.
This is the book that I wrote about 8 years ago, and my brand of my company is called The Thought Gym, and the reason behind that was because it was, train the mind and the rest will follow.
Yeah.
At first, we can't change a behavior without really trying to address the mindset that drives that behavior, and most people try and change the behavior, which sometimes has limited success, right? You can, buddy up with someone, go to the gym, and then that will maybe change your mindset and believe you're a gym person. But sometimes working on the mindset first will then make everything else easier as well. And now the mindset's the hardest thing to change. So language is something I'm really, really passionate about focusing in, because like you say, the way that we talk to ourselves, and it was something that I guess we all do. And, I often ask in my talks and seminars, hands up if you talk to yourself, and maybe like a quarter of the audience will put their hand up or something, because everyone has been taught to learn, if you talk to yourself, you're crazy or something. I say, well, those that haven't put their hand up, it's the voice inside you now saying, I don't talk to myself. Okay. That's the voice that's going on. So we all talk to ourselves, and the way that we talk to ourselves creates part of our identity and who we believe we are.
Yeah.
And even I was again, like I say, I've got my niece on my brain at the moment, because I'm trying to teach her stuff, and so she was struggling with a bit of Lego yesterday, and she was saying, "Oh, this is impossible. This bit." I go. Firstly, we don't have that here, right? There's no impossible. There's no can't. Okay, right? You're still figuring it out. You haven't figured it out yet, whatever the term is, but you've got to catch them young, because otherwise, and I know this through experience, you say, I'm no good at taking penalties, I'm no good at this, or I always miss. Anything like that is just going to be reinforced, and that's what you'll end up believing. And I guess we are, in a way, as humans, designed to drill into the negative in a way. Why is that? Is because it basically kept us safe.
Yes.
Otherwise, we wouldn't be here today if we weren't inherently aware of, when we come back from our bushwalk, that stick is out of place, and that could mean that a lion has moved it, and we need to be ready for that. So we're drawn to the negative, which is why we're drawn to like the CNN, Crisis News Network, or whatever we want to call it, because it draws us in and it captivates us. And that's not good or bad, it just is. The challenge is that most of what's going on is actually really positive. The reason things are like newsworthy is because they are, by definition, not the norm. Otherwise, there'd be no point in reporting them usually. So how does one change that mindset to then drive towards the positive and say, oh, that was a really good investment versus, oh, I'm going to lose all my money in this investment I've just made. And the thing that I did, and again, this was actually at the Yes Group, Jane. So the first ever Yes Group I went to in January 2011. So I think I went to their first event in December, which was like their basket brigade thing they do, where they give baskets of food out to people.
Yeah.
And the first actual event I went was then, and it was like a health one. But at the Q&A at the end, one of the speakers suggested doing a 30-day gratitude log. So writing down 3 things that you're grateful for in a book before you go to bed for 30 days. So I thought, I was just at the beginning of this journey. Everything was new and exciting. I was learning about all these things. So I was like, yeah, I'm going to do that. I'm going to do that. Now, I'm by nature, I wouldn't say a negative person, but I'm definitely someone that has more of a critical eye. So I'd probably make quite a good book editor. I can see what's kind of wrong quite quickly. And what I noticed after doing 30 days of that is a fundamental shift in how I saw things, because I started to seek out things that were good in my life.
Yeah.
And I decided to carry it on, and I've carried it on since that day. I've got filled up tons and tons of books, and about 2 years ago as well, I finally managed to convince some members of my family in our family WhatsApp group to do a 30-day one as well. And we would just write down 3 things that we're grateful for, share it with the group. Now we're on day 800 and something. We literally passed 2 years on the 19th of February. So my intention was just to do 30 days. And then on day 31, my mum wrote in there again. So I didn't say, hey, we've done our 30 days, let's stop. We just carried on. And so now 2 years later, this is a really good way that we keep up with what's going on in the day. Now, you don't have to say what you're grateful for that day. It could be what happened last year or 10 years ago, or 15 years ago, 50 years ago. Could be big, could be small, doesn't matter. But that really can change. That, for me, I'd recommend for all my clients, kind of no matter where their happiness level is, their mindset level is, I always recommend that kind of practice, because it is so fundamentally mindset shifting. That will be the first step to kind of creating that mindset for success, I believe.
Yeah,
definitely.
Actually focusing on what you have got and what is going right, as opposed to what you haven't got and what's going wrong.
Yeah, absolutely.
As you said, it's the default setting for a lot of people, really, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. And especially at this time, right? Time in our lives, with everything that's been going on, maybe you've been laid off, maybe you're furloughed, maybe you haven't had any income for a while, whatever it is. I get that, right? I've had lots of a tumultuous year as well. The thing is, though, that there is good. There is always good, and it's doing that gratitude practice when things are tough. That when it's really counts, not when it's good. Like, there are certain people that I know who are doing these gratitude practices who can only write in there when suddenly everything's great for them. And like, it's great, do it. And at the same time, the most benefit comes when you're doing it when you've broken your leg and you've broken up with your girlfriend and you've lost your job and all of that, and then you still find that day something to be grateful for, right? I had an amazing few years with this person, and I learned a lot and I grew a lot, and I know what to do to take into my next relationship. My bones will heal. Isn't it amazing how the body has this adaptive ability, whatever it is? And I know this sounds, this is superfluous, but these are things that literally happened to me. Okay. And I still found on those days things to be grateful for in that turmoil. And it really is, I think, in my view, a bit of a lifesaver. Yeah.
So Harry, I've got a challenge for you, because I think I'm fairly advanced in this respect, in that because I'm a cancer survivor, I've been through an awful lot in my life. So I wanted to learn quite a lot of, should we say, kind of mindset hacks or whatever, in order to stay really positive and healthy and kind of pushing ahead and just the best version of myself. But I've noticed, because I try to be very consciously aware of my thinking and so on, that I have this, my challenge is that I have a very suspicious mind.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, when I look back, I think at times that has really served me well, because I've got quite a strategic brain, so I can foresee problems before they arise. And also I'm quite kind of intuitive. So in some respects, that has really helped me in terms of the businesses that I've built. And in other respects, I find that I overthink things to the point where I personalize, and then it's almost like I take it too far. My brain takes it too far. And sometimes I see, my mind is so dark, I see problems where, people perhaps have kind of quite benign intentions, and I'm sort of reading all of these potential problems and sort of darkness into what they do. And I think I'm not unusual in that respect.
No.
I guess they're two flip sides of the same coin. But what I'd love to hear your feedback in terms of, okay, so how can I bring a little bit more balance into my thinking using all your toolbox?
Yeah. Yeah, it is a challenge. And the reason I say it's a challenge is because I've noticed that in myself as well. And I know where I get it from as well, I think.
Where do you get it from?
For me, I in terms of that, I guess the suspicion of, well, the bit where you mentioned where maybe people might have benign motives, but actually you think there's, what do they want from me, or what are they after? Yeah. I think I get that from my mum, definitely. As much as she's like my number one fan, love her to bits, I know that she has always been like more guarded, and I guess it comes from her upbringing as well. She came from like not a village, like quite a big town in Cyprus, but I think their family was like the first to be able to have a car in the village, or my grandmother was the first to drive, or something like that. And it's like, other people are kind of looking at you as, and so they're always kind of guarded about that and trusting people. And when I had and so I kind of grew up a bit like that, whereas I was in a previous relationship a number of years ago, and the woman was very much the opposite, and way more kind of expressive and out there and trusting of people. And what I realized, and I started to be a bit more like that, and then I would notice my mom was like, you got to be careful, people might, take advantage of you. And then I thought to myself, well, that's going to happen, right? So firstly I go, that is going to happen, right?
Yeah, and it will.
It will happen. But let's say it happens 1 or 2 or 5 or 10 times out of 100.
Yeah.
By building that wall to stop people from, attacking you, you also stop people from coming in as well.
Yeah.
And I guess it's a challenging one because it serves you. I mean, like when I was traveling for 2+ years, I don't think I had, any like bad incidents. And most of that was because I was deeply suspicious of like, the people, that would be really friendly, because especially like elsewhere in the world, they're really friendly. Like in the UK, we're often like a little bit, especially like London, a bit more kind of reserved. But out there, everyone's like friendly, like, I'll come over for dinner or do this or that. And I'm like, I'm not going into these people's houses or doing this or doing
rob me.
Yeah, exactly. Everyone's out to get you, And so it did serve me to some degree, because I didn't have any incidents, but maybe I would have had different experiences had I been a bit more open back then. Who knows? Maybe I'd be in a Thai jail now. I don't know, right? But so I guess my short answer is I'm still working on it. But I think part of it is accepting that things like that will happen. The bad things will happen, but if you live your life like that, you then have the potential to lose all the other good things. And so, I've had issues where I don't know, maybe not swindled out of money per se, but you've invested in the wrong thing because you're too trusting of that person, or you've been taken advantage of by that person for something. But
yeah, I've had a lot of those incidents.
Yeah, and I was listening to Wayne Dyer actually today. I've gone back after a period of about I was listening to audio programs for about solidly for 5 years, like Tony Robbins stuff hundreds of times, Wayne Dyer, Bob Proctor, all of that, Jack Canfield.
Yeah.
And the last 5-6 years I went to podcasts. Now I've got a bit bored of podcasts. I'm back on all the audios. I'm listening to Wayne Dyer, and you know, he was talking about how when people have maybe near-death experiences, or you know, they realize a lot of the stuff that, you know, they're worried about, like, is small stuff. You know, I mean, even I was a little bit stressed, right? I live by myself, right? And then I've invited a 7-year-old, and then my sister as well, who's probably worse in terms of messiness than the 7-year-old, into this house. And it's like, you know, like craziness, right? Because, you know, they have so much stuff for such small people, right? With all their books and whatnot, and then mess everywhere. And you got to let go. You've got to let go of that stuff and realize, you know, Les Brown says a great line, which I always remember. He's like, don't sweat the small stuff. He goes, and it's all small stuff. And and I guess it's realizing that to some degree. But you have to think of it in the moment, which is the challenging thing.
But you know, I guess you know, bad things do happen to good people, and it's all part of life, isn't it? That we learn through our painful experiences and our challenges, and it's unrealistic unless we just wrap ourselves in cotton wool and don't take any risks and don't go anywhere and don't live life to the full, to expect that we aren't going to get bruised. And so isn't it really just our attitude towards those bruises and how we react and how we choose to react that actually determines our happiness?
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it's never the thing, right? So one of the equations that I learned from Jack Canfield, I'm sure you would have heard it as well, but E plus R equals O. I'm not sure if you've heard this one or not, but it's not his equation, but I think it's one that I heard from Jack Canfield, probably from the Success Principles. But E plus R equals O just stands for event plus response equals outcome. So the event is losing the job, right? The response might be, normally when I do a seminar, people will say reaction. And I say, actually, we're not looking for a reaction, we're looking for a response, because the reaction and response are different. The reaction is almost automated. Like, imagine if you went to a doctor and you were feeling ill and they said, okay, take this pill, come back in a week. And a week later you go back there and the doctor says, you know, your body has been reacting to this pill. Or let's talk about vaccines, maybe, right? Here's the vaccine. Your body has reacted to the vaccine. Or they come back a week later and say your body has responded to the vaccine, right? What do you really want to hear? That the vaccine is, your body's responding to the vaccine or reacting to the vaccine? So the response is about choice. It's about creating a gap between the stimulus and response that you get. So the stimulus being the event, and, you know, the response having that gap, which allows you to choose. As Victor Frankl, that gap allows you choice. So E plus R, the response to an event. So you lose your job, the response or the reaction might be, this is rubbish. Why did they fire me? I'm going to watch daytime TV for the next 6 months, whatever. And then the outcome is losing job is bad, right? Everyone sucks. Life is rubbish. Or the event is lose your job. The response is, right, I get to spend more time with my kids. I get to work on that side project. I get to finally launch that business that I really wanted to. And therefore the outcome is good. So, you know, I think it was Shakespeare. He said, nothing is good nor bad, just thinking makes it so. And it's Hamlet. Hamlet. Yeah. So yeah, exactly. So the response is what determines your outcome in life. Because that's ultimately, we don't have much choice about what happens. The only thing we can choose is our attitude and our actions. And so bad things are going to happen, but they are, I always like to think, like, life never gives you anything that it doesn't think you can handle. Okay. And one of the things I heard once, which it's really stuck with me, is that everything works out in the end, or everything turns out okay in the end. And if it's not okay, then it's not the end. You know, it's these things that get me through the last 12 months, right? Or the knowledge that this too shall pass, which is one of my big mantras in life about the nature of life. And yeah, all of this stuff, although they sound like cliches, I find that whenever you hear a cliche, you should pay great attention to it, because it's usually a cliche for a good reason. And, you know, it's all a practice. So we're not perfect, things like that. You know, I say this stuff and I I talk about this stuff in interviews or in videos or in talks, but a lot of the time I talk about this stuff because it's for me to learn as much as it is for my audience to learn.
Oh yeah, definitely. And you know, I've been through a lot in lots of different ways. And sometimes I think, you know, why me? You know, why have I experienced all this stuff in my life? And then I just think, well, I'm a generational game changer. That is my role. I think that. And you know, that it kind of frames it. It sort of makes sense of that. Look, I've been here because I've come from that, and I'm going to this, and my children are going to this. And I am the catalyst and the game changer that all of this stuff has to happen to, in order to give me the wisdom to pass it on to the next generation and to be the change maker. And I think, you know, you can, that to me, that is a comforting thought. So I think we all have to find our peace, don't we, with life and all the events that happen.
Exactly. And, you know, sometimes we often ask, you know, you said, oh, you know, why does this happen to me or whatever? It could be that you say, we're always, as humans, we're always searching for meaning, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, what does this mean? Why did this happen? Why did, you know, like, I remember my best friend of, you know, since I was at school, he ended up having a heart attack at 33 years old. And he's like a surgeon, like live hard, party hard kind of person. And you know, got a call from his fiance at the time, now wife, to say that he was in hospital and had a heart attack. He was rushed to this hospital. Anyway, I was like, we could try and say, you know, what does this mean? What, you know, why did this happen? You know, and we could say, well, okay, yeah, maybe he never really cooked healthy foods, and he was working too hard and playing too hard and all that. You know, what does all this mean? And I say, like, you know, again, I think it's Shakespeare, nothing has any meaning except for the meaning you give it. And if you decide that it means that this is an opportunity at 33, because actually surviving a heart attack at 33 maybe is more likely than surviving it at 83 or 63, and it gives you a lot more time to change your lifestyle to do things. Mm-hmm. He took a different meaning actually from it, in that, like, life is really short, so I need to work even harder to get what I want to get done. But that's the meaning he's taken from it, right? And that's fine. And ultimately, nothing means anything except for the meaning that you give it, including, you know, we look for the meaning of life, and I like to think of the meaning of life as being a few different things. One is just purely to experience it, right? That's the meaning of life, just to experience life. I guess spirits can't experience things like ice cream and chocolate and crisps. And the other meaning I give it is to love and serve others. And I think that's the meaning of life. Now, I could be wrong in that. I could be right in that. I could be partially right. It doesn't really matter. Because ultimately you say, is the meaning I'm giving this thing serving me or not? Because if it is serving you, then often it doesn't matter whether it's the absolute truth, the absolute meaning, or what. It just matters whether it is benefiting you. If you decide that all of these things happen to you because you're really unlucky and you know, then that's going to be your story. If you decide that all these things happen to you because you're super resilient and, you know, you're going to be the light that shines the way for other people to overcome these things, then you're going to get a different story from it. And that's, you know, neither right or wrong. It's just up to you to decide what meaning works for you best.
And I remember actually one of the people that I met at the Yes group, something stuck in my mind, and he said, we're spiritual creatures having a human experience, which I loved actually. I thought that was pretty powerful. So that is so amazing. Harry, listen, it's been an absolute pleasure to speak to you tonight. I've really enjoyed this conversation. And, you know, I'm sure that all of our viewers and listeners will have got an awful lot from it as well. So tell us, if somebody wants to get in touch with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
I'm accessible on all social media platforms as The Thought Gym. And I say thought as in thinking, because often people think I'm saying fortune as in money. So The Thought Gym. I have lots and lots of personal development, mindset, success principle videos on YouTube, hundreds in fact. So that's the best way, or they can just go to thethoughtgym.com or harry.hk to find out more about me. So Hari is how you spell Harry, not as in Prince Harry, but more as in Hari, like Indian. So Hari.hk for Harry Kalymnios or Hong Kong. But harry.hk is a good place, and you can send me an actual direct message there as well.
Well, fabulous. Thank you so much anyway for joining us. And I'll see you again tomorrow morning, actually, Harry, because
we'll see you tomorrow.
Group together, aren't we? So see you at 9 a.m.
I'll see you there.
All right then. Okay. Bye for now.
Bye.